Installation of Windows XP. Okay, I can hear you out there saying, installing XP, that's a breeze. You just put the CD into the computer, start it up, and let it rip. Well, in some cases, sure, it is that easy. However, to ensure that the installation proceeds as smoothly as possible, it's best to know what installation and compatibility gotchas that may lie in your path between you and a successful installation. To that end, in this video we're going to learn about any pre-installation measures that you should take prior to upgrading your computer to Windows XP and performing a clean install of Windows XP by using the Windows XP CD-ROM based installation media. So let's have some fun here. Okay, before you take that Windows XP CD and slap it into the computer and start the installation process, you have to make sure your computer meets at least the minimum hardware requirements for the installation process. Those minimums are laid out right here. You have to have a Pentium 2, 233 megahertz or higher. It's recommended to have at least a 400 to 450 megahertz or higher processor for acceptable performance. Additionally, the bare bones minimum amount of RAM that's required to install Windows XP is 64 megs. Microsoft recommends 128 megs of RAM as the minimum, and realistic minimums for business environments really is 256 megs of RAM, but as far as the test is concerned, you should have at least 64 megs of RAM in that computer to install Windows XP. And lastly, you should have 1.5 gigabytes of free disk space in order to allow room for the temporary files that are used during the installation process and the actual system files for Windows XP. So certainly a huge difference from the days of Windows 95 that used about 60 megs of hard drive space for the entire operating system. But in addition to making sure that your computer meets the minimum hardware requirements for installing Windows XP, you also have to check to see if the devices in that computer, your sound card, your network card, all those type of components, and the software that you're running on that computer are also compatible with Windows XP. And there's a couple of ways to go about this. You can go to Microsoft's website to check for compatibility, but what you need to know about is how to run a compatibility checker that's included on the Windows XP CD. So let's take a look at that right now. The tool that Microsoft included to check for hardware and software compatibility in Windows XP is called the Upgrade Advisor. And this tool is located on the Windows XP CD. And this is actually a replacement for the Windows 2000 professional compatibility checker called the Readiness Analyzer. But interesting enough, the Upgrade Advisor is run by using the same command that was used in Windows 2000. And that command is WinNT32 with the longest switch known to man. Check upgrade only. What the heck is this? Now we've got a paragraph that we have to type in to execute a command. But anyhow, so that's how you kick off the Upgrade Advisor. Let's slap in our Windows XP CD and see what this thing does for us. The very first step that we have to do is to open up a run command to execute WinNT32 with the check upgrade only switch. To do that, click on Start and then click on Run. The next thing we have to do is type in the file path location to the WinNT32 command, which is located in the i386 directory on your Windows XP CD, or you can click on the Browse button to accomplish the same task. Let's use our Browse button here and browse out to our Windows XP CD, going to our i386 directory, and locate WinNT32. Here it is. The next thing that we have to do is type in our really long switch, the check upgrade only switch. I've got it right here in my most recently used list. I'm going to select that. Then to launch the Upgrade Advisor, just simply click on OK. And that fires up the Upgrade Advisor from the CD. And the Upgrade Advisor has a really nice feature called Dynamic Update, and you'll actually see this during the installation process as well. What Dynamic Update allows you to do is download prior to the installation any setup fixes, critical fixes, security fixes that have occurred since Windows XP was released in October the 25th, 2001. Now, there are two methods you can download these fixes. The first method we're looking at right now, just go right out to the internet and download these fixes from Microsoft's website. The second method that we'll look at after this example is to download the fixes ahead of time from a corporate update page and place those fixes on a file server in your environment. The benefit of this is if you're performing many installations of Windows XP simultaneously, you're not going to slow down your WAN connections by having all these computers going out to the internet and downloading these updates and fixes. So by keeping these in-house, we can point the installation process to a file server in-house to get the same updates. So we'll look at that after we finish this example. So let's download the files from the internet. Click on Next. Goes to Microsoft's website using Dynamic Update. Downloads the software. And it says Updating Setup. This is actually the same process that you'll see during the installation of XP. The reason why we're using the Upgrade Advisor now is just simply to perform an audit to see whether or not our computers are up to snuff for running Windows XP instead of going through the entire installation process. And thankfully my computer right here shows no incompatibilities. You're ready to go. If the Upgrade Advisor did find some problems, it would display those problems right here, list them one by one, and you could then save the information that Windows XP's Upgrade Advisor found in a little text file just by clicking on Save As. And this is one method to run the Upgrade Advisor. You can actually, if you don't have the Windows XP CD, you can actually download the Upgrade Advisors from Microsoft's website as well. It's a 50 meg download, so if you got a slow dial-up connection, do be aware of that. But what I'd like to do now is just finish out of here and show you where you can download that file from. So let's open up our web browser, click Start, Internet Explorer. Then simply go to Microsoft's main homepage, and from their main homepage just type in Upgrade Advisor, click on Go, and that's going to bring up a link here where we can get the Upgrade Advisor from. And if we scroll down here, we can download the Upgrade Advisor. What you might want to do is pause the video and write down the direct URL to this homepage. As I mentioned, it's a pretty large file, so I've previously downloaded the file to my hard drive. Let's take a look at what that looks like. I placed it on my C partition, so let's click on Start, My Computer, and go to our C partition. And I've got it right down here. It looks very similar to the Upgrade Advisor that we just ran off the Windows XP CD. It fires up some temporary files, and then in just a second here we'll get a little bit of a different GUI interface here, but for the most part the functionality is exactly the same. The interface is just a little different. So this is what I was referring to. Hey, we've got the official Upgrade Advisor. How can we help you? Just click on Next. You accept the terms? Yes, yes, thank you. And would you like to download the latest files from the internet? Yes or no? So if you click on yes, it now goes through the same process that we just looked at a second ago. And so it's now going to the internet, downloading any patches and fixes, and then you're off to the races. So what I'd like to do next is show you the method for downloading these updates ahead of time from Microsoft's website and placing them on a file server. So let's take a look at that option next. The second method for downloading dynamic updates requires that you first go to Microsoft's corporate Windows Update website. So let's do that first. Click on Start, then click on Internet Explorer. And Microsoft's corporate website for dynamic updates is located at this URL. You might want to pause the video right now to jot this down. And another thing to take note of is that you can only use Windows XP to get to this site. Yes, you heard me correctly. You can't use Windows 95, Windows 98, NT, nothing other than Windows XP and Windows.NET Server. If you happen to have a copy of that, it will allow you to get to this site. So now that you're here, just click on the right hand side, Find Updates for Microsoft's Windows operating systems. Choose the appropriate system, in this case Windows XP, and then just click on the search button. And so we've got numerous critical updates and recommended updates. And let's just select one just as an example here. So I'm going to add that to my download basket. I'm going to go to our download basket. And now you just type in the Universal Naming Convention path, or UNC path, to a file server in your organization. And so I'm going to type in a file server that I have here, and a share path got called updates, and click on download now. And yes, I accept the terms of the license agreement. Pretty small file, and bada bing, bada boom, we're done. So the next thing that we have to do is actually go to our target machine and point to that share location that we just downloaded the files to incorporate the dynamic update files during the installation process without going to the internet. So let's check that out next. Let's just quickly review exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. In our first example, we used the Upgrade Advisor to check the compatibility of our computer. And in this example, we've already determined that our computer is compatible by using the Upgrade Advisor. And now we want to actually start the installation process. But instead of downloading the dynamic updates from the internet, we want to download the dynamic updates from the file server that we've already placed those files onto. So to accomplish this task, what we have to do is run the WinNT32 command with two switches. The first switch will be used to prepare the SharePoint, and the next switch will actually be used to start the installation process off with the actual dynamic update files. To do this, click on Start, then click on Run, and then we're using WinNT32 to start the installation process with a switch called DU prepare : no space with the universal naming convention path to the location that you had downloaded the dynamic update files to. So we've got WinNT32 DU prepare DC Nuggets updates. Updates is my SharePoint that I downloaded those files to. And we just click on OK. It does a quick little repair. Don't blink. It's gone. Let's try that one more time so you can see that. Just real quick. Up, down, gone. And the SharePoint has been prepared. Now the next step is to actually start the installation process off by using WinNT32. So click on Start, Run. And in this situation, we're using a new switch called DU share : no space and the universal naming convention path. When I click on OK, it's going to actually start the installation process. Now the difference being here, though, is when I click on Next and enter in the installation key, it will then in turn download the dynamic updates from our file server DC Nuggets updates instead of going all the way out to the internet. So real nice feature here. Please take note of that for the exam. Okay, now that we know that our computer and the devices in our computer are compatible with Windows XP, let's find out exactly which Windows operating systems we can actually upgrade to Windows XP. And we have a little chart before us that shows the direct upgrade paths to Windows XP. So this has changed a little bit from the upgrade paths from Windows 2000. You can upgrade from 98, Millennium, NT4 with Service Pack 6, Windows 2000, and yes, you can even upgrade Windows XP Home Edition to Windows XP Professional. The one item that is not on this list is Windows 95. The registry in that operating system and its lack of support for a lot of features just did not make for a good upgrade, so they dropped that off the list. Okay, now that you know that the computer and the devices in the computer are compatible with Windows XP Professional by using the Upgrade Advisor, let's find out exactly which operating systems can be upgraded to Windows XP Professional. And I've got a nice little chart here to help us with that task. Windows 98, Windows Millennium, Windows NT4 Workstation with Service Pack 6, and Windows 2000 Professional, and even Windows XP Home Edition can all be upgraded to Windows XP Professional Edition. The operating systems that cannot be upgraded to Windows XP Professional are Windows 95 and previous versions of Windows NT, such as Windows NT 351 Workstation. And before you actually start the upgrade process, make sure you back up any files just in case something goes bump in the night and the upgrade process fails on you. Make sure you scan for any viruses and eradicate any viruses from the hard drive. Perform a defrag of the hard drive as well, defragmentation, clean up everything. Speaking of defragmentation, if you're upgrading NT4 Workstation and if you're running a disk utility program on NT4 Workstation such as DiskKeeper version 4, that application, that version of that application is not compatible with Windows XP. So you have to remove that application before you start the upgrade process to Windows XP. Also, with Windows NT4 workstations that are using span sets or stripe sets, those versions are not compatible with Windows XP. Windows XP uses a different method for implementing span sets and stripe sets rather on something called dynamic disks, which we'll look at in a later video. So if you have an NT4 workstation that has spanned or striped sets, you're going to have to first back up all the data on those sets, and then before you actually start the upgrade process, you're going to have to delete the span and stripe sets using Disk Manager, and then once you've done that, you can actually start the upgrade. So once you've taken care of all those tasks, your next task is simply to start the upgrade process. And that can be accomplished in a couple of ways. Number one, the easiest way is just to take the Windows XP CD and just throw it in the computer, and the splash screen will prompt you to start the upgrade process. Or you can run WinNT32 as we looked at just a little earlier with our dynamic update switches. So let's take a look at using WinNT32 again to start the upgrade process, and that's done by clicking on Start, Run, and then just type in the path to the i386 directory and type in WinNT32 or click on Browse, and let's find our Windows XP CD. Go to i386, and here's good old WinNT32. So to kick this off, we just click on OK, and that will fire up our little splash screen here. Welcome to Windows Setup. And we've got two options to choose from. We can start an upgrade, or if we want to create a dual boot with Windows 98 or previous operating system to Windows XP, you would choose New Installation. Now, if you want to create a dual boot between Windows 98 and Windows Millennium and Windows XP, you'll have to make sure that the file system currently is either FAT or FAT32. And the reason for that is Windows 98 and Windows Millennium are not compatible with Windows NT file system, or NTFS for short. If you're just doing a straight upgrade from those operating systems and it currently does have a file system with FAT or FAT32, after the upgrade process has completed, you can actually convert from those file systems to NTFS to gain those benefits that NTFS has to offer. And then you just click on Next. Yes, I'm going to agree to the end user license agreement. Type in your 25-character product identification key, and then you just sit here for about 50 minutes and answer all the installation prompts. Oh joy! Well, there are more efficient methods for installing Windows XP. We've got a couple of methods for performing a clean installation of Windows XP that we're going to take a look at next. So let's cancel out of here and look at a network method for installing Windows XP and a couple of automated methods for installing Windows XP, and the switches that are involved that control the installation process. So we just saw how we could start the upgrade process by using the WinNT32 command, but there are actually some additional switches that we can use to further modify and customize the upgrade process. Let's take a look at those now by opening up our help command, which has a listing of all the switches that can be used with WinNT32. So that's done by clicking on Start, click on Help Support, and then we're going to do a search on WinNT32, which will return information about WinNT32 and in turn all the switches. And that information is found by just clicking on the link called WinNT32. And on the right hand side we get an explanation about what WinNT32 is about and all of its switches. So let's take a look at those right now. So as we've talked about, WinNT32 is used to upgrade from these operating systems to Windows XP Professional, or to create a dual boot clean installation between these operating systems and Windows XP Professional. It's a little typo here. Remember, you cannot upgrade from Windows 95 to Windows XP Professional. Now let's look at the switches we can use to modify the upgrade process, which are listed here. Let's start off with our first switch, which we've already taken a look at. We use the Check Upgrade Only switch to run the Upgrade Advisor. The next switch, the command line switch, is used to run typically some batch files at the last phase of the setup process. The CMD CONS switch allows you to install the Recovery Console, which is a command line environment that you can boot into to help troubleshoot Windows XP. We'll look at this during our troubleshooting video later on. And the copy directory switch and the copy source switch are very similar in their functionality. The copy directory switch allows you to copy a directory. Typically you might want to include some drivers that are not included on the Windows XP CD, and this will be copied into the Windows directory. The copy source switch performs the same functionality. Copies a folder with any files you have in it. Might be some additional drivers, may not be. But the difference being is, after the installation has completed, the copy source switch actually deletes those files and the folder itself. Moving on down, we have the debug switch, which is typically used by programmers to find out what's happening during the installation process. Several levels of information can be displayed. And then moving on down here, we have 3 dynamic update switches. There's a switch that you can use to actually disable dynamic update from running. And really the only reason why you typically use that switch is if you don't have a connection to the internet to go to Microsoft's website to download the dynamic update files, or you have not previously downloaded the files to a corporate file server to get the dynamic update files from. So if you have no network connectivity to grab the dynamic update files, you could save some time during the installation phase simply by disabling dynamic update. We have looked at the DU Prepare switch and the DU Share switch earlier on to start the installation process by including the dynamic update files that you've downloaded to a corporate file server by first preparing the SharePoint, and then starting the installation process by including the dynamic update files with the DU Share switch. The M switch is a handy switch to include, say for example, some OEM drivers for some specific hardware you might have, maybe for a RAID controller or a SCSI hard disk controller, by pointing to a different file server you might have in your environment. And the Make Local switch will be used when you're installing, could be used when you're installing from a CD to include the contents of your i386 directory right on the hard drive, which is very helpful when you're trying to install a service or some type of protocol that was not installed during the installation process. And when you actually go to install those pieces, it prompts you for the CD. Well, you can use the Make Local switch to include all the installation files, and that way you won't be prompted for the CD when it comes time to install some additional services. And the No Reboot switch tells setup, hey, not to reboot. Don't restart after you've completed the final phase of setup. And the S switch is handy if you're not installing Windows XP from the CD, but you've got the source files located out on a file server somewhere. Just use the S switch to point to where those source files are. And the syspart switch allows you to take the setup files and the i386 directory, place it on a hard drive, mark that hard drive as active, and then just take that hard drive to a Windows NT computer or Windows 2000 computer and just start the installation process. And the temp switch allows you to redirect the location that Windows XP will place the temporary files during the installation process. And the UDF switch we'll talk more about during our unattended installation talk coming up in a little bit. This allows you to add unique parameters for many computers, and you can also save 50 minutes of your time of watching the installation process by not attending it. You can customize an upgraded installation of Windows XP by creating an answer file which will include all the installation prompts, and use WinNT32 with the unattend switch along with an answer file which we'll learn how to create in our unattended section coming up here. So that will save you 50 minutes of time watching the installation process. So those are the key switches that you can use with WinNT32. In addition to upgrading to Windows XP, we can also perform a clean installation of the operating system by installing Windows XP on a hard drive that has been reformatted. Then you launch the installation process with the WinNT command from a network distribution SharePoint. Now the first step in this process is to place the contents of the i386 directory from your Windows XP CD on a file server in your environment. I've done this ahead of time. Let's see how that looks on my file server. I'm going to click on Start. We're going to use the UNC path to connect to a file server that I have called DC Nuggets. So I'm going to click on OK. See all the SharePoints in this particular file server, and one of the SharePoints is the i386 directory. So what you would do is go to your target computer with a network boot disk, boot off the network boot disk into a DOS environment, connect to your file server, and map to the i386 directory. And then after you've accomplished that task, you'll run the WinNT command from this directory. Now let's take a look at how you would actually start the installation process with the WinNT command from a distribution SharePoint. So what we're going to do here is pretend that this computer is the target computer that we're going to perform a clean install of Windows XP on. And we're going to do that by opening up a command prompt. We're going to choose Start, Run, and here's a little shortcut for opening up the command prompt. You just type in CMD, and what we're going to do is pretend that this command prompt is our network boot disk environment, where we've gone to the target computer with our network boot disk. We've booted off the floppy disk or the network boot CD, and the network card has initialized. So the next thing that we have to do is map to our distribution SharePoint, which in this example is DC Nuggets i386. So I'm going to use the netuse command and use some available drive letter. And then we just type in the UNC path to the file server that we've copied the contents of the i386 directory to. And there we go. So now we're going to change the directory to the drive letter that we've mapped to. And let's try that one more time. There we go. And then to start off the installation, you just simply type in WinNT, and that's all there is to it. So what we've done in this example is we've accomplished two things. Number one, we would perform a clean install of Windows XP using this method. And number two, this method centralizes the installation files to a central location, and this alleviates you having to walk around with the Windows XP CD and using that CD to install Windows XP on every single computer in your organization, which certainly is not a lot of fun. The downside about using this method is that we would have to sit here and answer all the installation prompts. This would also be what's called an attended installation, where you have to sit here and attend the installation for about 50 minutes answering all those installation prompt questions. Well, just like WinNT32 command, the WinNT executable also has several switches that can be used to customize and also automate the installation process, and we can take a look at those commands by using the question mark switch, the help switch. And most of them are very similar to the WinNT32 switches that we've already taken a look at. The S switch, its functionality is identical to the S switch in WinNT32. Just tell me where the contents of the i386 files are. The T switch is used to redirect the contents of the temporary directory. The U switch is to tell WinNT where the answer file is that contains the answers for all the installation prompts. And the UDF switch we'll be looking at a little more in just a second. It'll contain all the unique information for all the computers that you want to install in your environment. And the R switch and the RX switch is very similar to the copy directory and copy source switches, where we're copying a folder inside the Windows directory, and we're copying a folder inside the Windows directory and then deleting that folder after the setup. And then the E switch allows you to run some type of batch command that you might have at the very end of the setup process. And the A switch, as it says here, we can enable any of the accessibility features that you might need. So these are the switches that we can use to launch an unattended installation of Windows XP. And we'll learn how to do that in the Advanced Installation Topics video. In this video, we've learned how to plan out our installation and check for any compatibility issues. And we've also learned how to use the WinNT32 and the WinNT commands to perform upgrade and clean installations of Windows XP. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.